We're checking in this morning with State Senator Jonathan Lindsey, and everything kind of on hold in Lansing right now. Obviously, with the August primary coming up tomorrow, deciding the races for who will be on the ballot in November, whether it's the governor's race, the U.S. Senate races, and in some cases House and Senate races around the state of Michigan. You don't have any Republican challenger here for the primaries, so you won't be well, you're on the ballot, but you won't have an opposition until till the November election coming up. As you look at the landscape right now, they say about 14% of folks did early voting, both in person and absentee so far. I know we've talked about that a little bit in the past, and you've weighed in on how you would like to see some things change about that. Does that number surprise you about where you thought it might be as far as folks, a couple days before the actual election itself, getting out and voting?
Well, good morning, Ken. And as far as the early voting, I wouldn't say it surprises me. There's been, for context for people listening, I think what we saw in the data in the lead up to yesterday is almost twice as many people when you combine both mail-in and people going into the in-person early voting 9-day window. It's grown a lot. And yeah, I think we talked about this last time I was on the show. I would much rather, my preference is that, we keep the option for in-person early voting where you can go in there, handle your ballot, fill it out, the traditional voting experience, because that's the one where this cycle compared to last, we've seen the most increase. I think it's just a natural thing that more and more people are realizing, oh, hey, I can drive into, the Dearth Center and fill out my ballot and be done. So that doesn't surprise me. There's a lot of people participating in that. The mail-in part is the part where, I think we used to have a pretty common sense system where it was available to anybody who needed it, but what we didn't used to have was this blast of all the applications getting sent out. And I hear this from people all the time still, where they get an application for an early ballot sent to their house for somebody who hasn't lived there in decades. And so that system is one where I want to see us fix it and maintain this sort of momentum where we've seen people able to engage with the system early and get in there and cast their ballot. But do it in a way, I personally like the in-person early, gives you options based on what your work schedule is, et cetera, to get in there and cast your ballot. But you do it kind of the old school way. You get to go in, fill it out, feed it in, and make sure it's locked in a box there. So I think they're good numbers. And I think tomorrow will be, obviously, like any election, a pretty important day. You've got high-profile races. The two for people to watch the most, I think, are on the Republican governor side, Perry Johnson versus John James will be a big contest. And then on the Democrat side, the U.S. Senate seat between Haley Stevens and Abdul El-Sayed will probably be the highest profile race that's really contested.
Well, and that one actually is getting a lot of national viewing simply because, again, what sides they come on. Haley Stevens considered the more traditional Democrat Party candidate. El-Sayed, maybe, well, people say radical, but on the socialist side. And that's kind of the new wave of the Democrat Party. And even on a national scene, saying, is that kind of the swing of what's going to happen to the Democrat Party? And there's a lot of look on Michigan. Obviously, the U.S. Senate has had Democratic senators for 32 years, something like that. And so if one of those two doesn't make it against Mike Rogers, then there's a big swing there coming up in November. So that one is even nationally is considered a pretty big race.
Yeah, it's a huge one, and it's something where the U.S. Senate, in theory, just depending how the election goes, the majority is on the line, right? It's currently held by Republicans. Could be enough opportunities across the country for Democrats to take a majority back. So you're right. A lot of framing around that race. Haley Stevens, current member of Congress, who, is the I don't choose these words, but I don't think it's unfair to say the establishment
Hmm.
chosen, the leadership has gotten behind her. Um, Abdul wants to shake things up, and so he gets framed. And you're right. You see this across the country. Democrats have had a lot more successes, actually, from candidates like him winning through primaries this cycle. And I'll just say something that might be, controversial because I think as Republicans we're supposed to say, oh my goodness, the radical left or whatever. But I don't really think that's the story. I think the story is that when you see that on the left or you see it with sort of insurgent candidates on the right, what it comes down to, I think, is it shows an appetite from the people to just have change in government, that they say what we're doing is not working. Whether it's talking about whether I trust the people in the party that I affiliate with to keep doing their job, I just think this is a longer narrative that goes all the way back to, you could call it the whole Trump era is defined by this, is that people look at their government and they say, is it serving we the people? And there's very different prescriptions for what to do about that if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, and your answer is no, the government isn't serving the people, but it often looks like calling for pretty big changes. And so right now, Abdul's up in the polls. We'll see what happens tomorrow, but that is certainly a key race and a very interesting dynamic.
Senator Jonathan Lindsey on the line with us this morning. Interesting that Abdul Saeed was in Branch County a couple of months ago at a Democrat Party meeting. Other than that, none of those candidates have actually made a stop in Branch County. Now, John James was over in Reading for their festival on Friday night, but the connection of issues on that scale as opposed to what issues are around here, which seem to be gas prices. A lot of folks talking about data centers. A lot of folks talking about solar farms and the control that the state has over how the siting of those are, whether solar farms or AI data centers or things like that. There's I don't know, almost seems like a little bit of a disconnect between what the candidates are talking about and what real people on the ground are talking about these days.
Well, it's interesting because actually I don't think any of the candidates have been able to really dodge, I mean, especially on the Republican side, if you look at that governor's race, the issues of local control on, data centers are the big point of conversation right now. But yeah, I think that one, the closest one, like you said, John James over there, Harry Johnson last week was over at Sturgis, and it was a very interesting. It was kind of all about how utilities and data centers, are trying to. This is what he's saying on the ground. There's a state house race over there of an incumbent, Steve Cara, who's been there for a few terms, and the utilities, through a dark money operation, are pouring $500,000 into trying to unseat him. Interestingly, he's run the oversight committee that does work on data centers, right? So it's a fascinating element where all the candidates, I think, are weighing in on that. But you're right; I'd love to see more of them in Branch County, and hopefully we'll have more of them. Whoever wins these primaries tomorrow, hopefully we'll have more of them come visit and engage with our voters.
With the idea of the AI centers, and that's obviously becoming a big thing now. There are a number of communities that have passed moratoriums, like a 1-year moratorium, because you can't permanently ban them, and then to try to rewrite regulations. Coldwater is kind of going down that same road now too, and they've got a joint meeting coming up later this month between the Planning Commission and the City Council to talk about that and how they might regulate that for the cities. And a lot of the townships are doing the same sort of things right now. What will be the end result on this, do you think? Will the state of Michigan take a different look at this? Because the governor has seemed to want to really push these.
Yeah, it's a tough issue. I've been out there. I've been sort of in a different place on this in terms of the local control element. I love the idea of local government, being very involved. But the problem I see is that if we don't do something about these data centers at a state level, what it forces is for each committee to have sort of a fist fight in a phone booth right in their town hall about how to handle it. And I don't think that's a healthy way. I understand communities have different needs, et cetera. But I think when it comes down to protecting ratepayers, making sure, because these things use a ton of electricity, protecting ratepayers, protecting the environment, mitigating harm from these things, and making sure that they're paying their own way. I mean, keep in mind, part of the issue in Michigan is that we have a law that gives them special tax breaks. We anticipated this specifically for hyperscale data centers. The legislature, I want to say in 2024, passed the bill to give them special incentives, better than what any business has in Michigan. I, of course, voted against that bill. So all of that to say is that I think that while the locals are going to work through it on their own, terms of what works in their communities, it's really important that we at a state level set the rules of the road in a way that keep people safe and also protect their interests, especially when it comes down to, what does the electricity generation and consumption look like, and what does that mean for ratepayers? If we're going to have them at all, they should be paying more than their own way. I don't have the bill published yet, but I've got one that we're working on that would require them to lock into purchasing electricity at a rate that is higher than what they expect, and they would have to buy it over a period of time, and they'd actually have to buy so much more electricity than what they anticipate to use that the excess would become effectively them paying the electricity bill for local residents. And that's beyond, like I said, they still need to be done in a way that it keeps everybody safe.
Right. And at the same time, obviously, we're more and more demand for people to use the services of AI data centers too. So we can't be hypocrites on that either, as more and more things of ChatGPT and other resources like that people are demanding.
Well, I think that's exactly right, and it's not just those. I mean, data centers are not one size fits all, and it is hypocritical when people come out and they become just purely anti-data center. And that position to me is no more sophisticated than just being anti-computer, anti-cell phone, or go far enough back and it's anti-automobile. If we were just talking about these automobiles, they're everywhere now, and the noise and the you imagine having them in your community. Well, we're going to need to adapt, and we're going to need to get very seriously. Don't get me wrong, and they do pose particular types of threats to people. But I don't think we can afford to just be an anti-progress. But I think we should be, real about what kinds of threats they pose and take responsible steps.
All right. Can I use that line, fist fight in a phone booth?
Sure.
I love that line. So.
I mean, it is sad though, because that is the biggest problem I think with these local control issues is that you don't want to see every community have to fight, thousands of these battles across the state just to be able to protect the people. As good as the intentions may be, that's sometimes why you need a protective layer at the state, so you don't have all of these fights.
Great stuff. Jonathan, thanks. If not sooner, we'll talk in a couple of weeks, or maybe we'll see you down at the Branch County Fair next week, all right?
You'll see me there. Thank you, Ken.
Bye-bye. That's State Senator Jonathan Lindsey. He's a fair alum himself, by the way, 4-H alum, so I'm sure he'll be at the fair.